Susa. In the story where we're at now, Nehemiah has already moved back to Jerusalem. This is going to be a problem. The verse that we're chasing down, to see God, we're trying to see whether when Nehemiah prays to God to help him, to give him success with this King Artaxerxes, that God does in fact answer his prayer. We know that it does, but this is the verse in Nehemiah 1:1. It says, "O Lord, I beseech you." This is Nehemiah's prayer to his God. "May your ear be attentive to the prayer of your servant and the prayer of your servants." He's praying on behalf of the people of Israel who delight to revere your name. "And make your servant successful today and grant him compassion before this man." And then he says, "Now I was the cupbearer to the king." What was the success that Nehemiah desired? What is it that he wanted from King Artaxerxes? We've seen it. He wanted to go back and rebuild the city of Jerusalem, which was in disrepair. He wanted to rebuild the walls, and he wanted to rebuild the gates of the city. Yahweh granted that request. He answered this prayer. We are watching the faithful, loyal promises of God concerning his city, Jerusalem, Zion, Mount Zion, the holy hill of God, all these things. We're watching God protect his city. Nehemiah wanted it done. God had said, "This is where I will dwell among the people, among Israel in Jerusalem." Nehemiah wanted to rebuild it. He asked for it, and God said, "Okay, it's time." So in 444 BC, Artaxerxes issued a decree that the city of Jerusalem could again be rebuilt, and he put Nehemiah in charge of the project. That's what we're talking about. That's where we are. He also sent, not only did he put Nehemiah in charge of the project, but he also sent him back to Jerusalem not empty-handed. He sent him back with an armed escort, courtesy of the king. An armed escort, military men, soldiers, escorted Nehemiah back to Jerusalem. And not only that, he also gave him permission to get timbers, any building supplies that he needed from Asaph, who was the keeper of the king's forest. Not only did Artaxerxes say, "Go back and rebuild the city," he said, "I'm going to make it as easy on you as I can." It was a wonderful change of heart in Nehemiah. So Yahweh indeed answered Nehemiah's question. He gave him the ability to go back to Jerusalem and start rebuilding the walls. What we have not seen yet is whether he actually got it done. And so that's where we are in Nehemiah chapter 4, waiting for Nehemiah to get the job done. I've got to turn around because this computer's just not right. Anyway, at least it's coming up here. I told you last time, I showed you two different maps of the ancient city of Jerusalem. And I told you at different times, under different rulers, under different Gentile empires, the walls of Jerusalem shrunk, they expanded, they shrunk again. And this is a good map of exactly that. All of these lines you see are different times in which Jerusalem was either smaller or larger. That's what this is. So right here, this lime-colored square is the Temple Mount. The Temple Mount still stands. Most of the mount is still there. Herod rebuilt this mount and enlarged it. You can see here, this line right here that I'm tracing, actually there it is right there in red. That is the wall, the original wall when the Jebusites, even before the Israelites took over, when the Jebusites had the land, that's what it looked like. That was what the city of Jerusalem looked like. This little area down here is what's called the city of David. This little tooth that sticks out, the little thumb. By the time Hezekiah comes along, the city walls are expanded. I'm not Hezekiah, yes, Hezekiah, but I'm talking about Nehemiah. By the time Nehemiah came along, this is what the city would have looked like. Drop that one out and bring in this green line. It would have included the Gihon Springs. So this is what that map looked like the other day. The refuse gate is down here at the bottom. The valley gate is right here. This was the valley of the cheesemakers. Since then, it's been built up over centuries and centuries. Dirt, silt has built this up so it's not a valley anymore, but yet the Kidron Valley still runs on this side, with the Mount of Olives being right here, the Garden of Gethsemane right over here. But this is what the city walls looked like when Nehemiah went back to repair them. Nehemiah exited the valley gate at night. He went around this way. He realized about here that the walls were in such disrepair he couldn't get around on his animal. So he came back through the valley, came back through this valley, entered the valley gate again. But Nehemiah is the one in charge of rebuilding this wall. That's what he's up to. That's the wall. I'm going to show you another square here. Look at this line, this blue line that comes up. On that map I showed you the other day, both of these, the green one was on the left, Nehemiah's map, and on the right was that blue line. That blue line is what Jerusalem looks like right now. The old city of Jerusalem looks exactly like that right now. So look at the amount of it that's been taken off. It used to be that the city of David, where the tombs of the kings are, was within the city walls. But it's not today. Things have changed and walls change based on people. This large gray square out here, this entire area was what the city walls were like in King Herod's day. But the Romans came and destroyed those walls. They've been built, rebuilt, torn down, rebuilt, torn down, rebuilt. The gates have changed. Obviously, there's more gates now around a bigger city wall. But it's this little green thing that we're talking about. That's what's going on while Nehemiah is trying to rebuild the wall. Just to give you an impression of the wall, I just want you to have something in your head showing you what they're building. Hey guys, this wall isn't just a single, like we would maybe build a wall. We build fences. We build fences out of 5/8 inch or 1/2 inch boards, and that's the whole fence. That's not how they built walls then. Walls were protection, and they needed to be thick, wide, so that soldiers could come up here and protect the city. You'll notice there between these little, where the holes are, so the soldiers can go out with their arrows and spears, there's a walkway behind that. And this is the width of the wall. All these ancient cities were built wide. Most walls were even wider than this. They were wide enough for you to live in the walls. Remember someone who lived on the city walls in Jericho? She lived within the city wall of Jericho. Her name was Rahab, the harlot. She lived in the wall, and remember the story was there was a window, and they let the spies out, or she was supposed to put the red scarlet out the window. It was Paul later that they let out a city gate window. But that's what the city walls looked like. Sorry this picture is blurry, but you can see here, sometimes the walls are wider and there's more space for soldiers. I'm telling you and showing you these pictures so when we start talking about what Nehemiah is building, you have some idea of the depth of the project. This is no simple thing. This isn't building a wooden fence. This is a major project. And so week after week after week, we're about to see the Jewish builders exhausted from the work. Exhausted from it, realizing we can't build this alone. Remember what I told you last time? You had perfumers, you had goldsmiths, you had merchants, you had men, women, you had everybody in Israel lending a hand to build this wall, not the stonemasons. If all you had building this wall was stonemasons, it would have taken years to rebuild that wall. But when you have everybody, the 40-something thousand people in Jerusalem lending a hand, you can build a wall like this in 52 days. 52 days is what it took Nehemiah and his people. That's how long it took them to rebuild the ancient city walls of Jerusalem. I'm not saying these are those walls. These walls have changed. Look how narrow the walkway is here. We're talking about 2.5, maybe 3 feet wide. But that's what the old city of Jerusalem looks like now. You can see the continuation of the walls over here. Just one more thing, because we're talking about the walls. Anybody know what this thing is called? This portion of the wall? This portion of the ancient wall still stands. It's called the Wailing Wall or the Western Wall, and this is where the Jews go. You can see them here. It's partitioned off. This section you can see is for men. Over on the other side of a barrier here, that's where the women, the Jewish women, go. The men and the women don't mix when they pray in the Jewish world. But the Western Wall is the closest spot. It's the closest to the Holy of Holies that a Jew can get in Israel. That's why they go to the Western Wall or the Wailing Wall to pray. You can imagine this is the Dome of the Rock. This is a Muslim shrine, a Muslim temple, what do they call them? Mosque. You can imagine, though, if you took that away, that's where the temple stood. So the temple was on the back side here, on the western side of the wall. So when you stand right here and pray, you are as close to where God Himself dwelt in the Holy of Holies in the temple as you can get. And that's why the Jews go to the wall. Now, I'm showing you this picture just because we're talking about the walls. This is not the ancient city wall. This is the temple, the temple wall. On this map, what you're seeing is this temple wall, this whole temple complex, the Temple Mount has been flattened so buildings could be put on it, and there's a wall all the way around it. I wish I'd have numbered sections of the wall to ask if anybody knows where the Wailing Wall is. Where is this portion of wall on this map? I'm going to tell you, it's right there. That's where the Western Wall, notice this picture is just about canted properly for direction. That means north is this direction. This is the Eastern Wall, the Kidron Valley. This is where Jesus Christ will return through the East Gate one day when He comes back into Jerusalem. But that little spot right there, that is this wall. Where's the wall? That is that wall. This wall extends all the way to the corner of the Temple Mount. So that wall goes from here, where is it again? It goes from here all the way to the corner, but at the corner it starts to get torn up. Not quite in the shape it used to be in. There is a pile of rocks right here, a pile of stone. I'm talking about massive rectangular building blocks that are not on the temple wall, not where they used to be. They're not on the mount. They have been thrown over. I've taken many pictures of them. I didn't intend to say this right here, but there's piles of rubble there. Remember what Jesus said? He said, not one stone shall be left upon another. There's a day coming soon, and when the Romans came in AD 70, they destroyed that Temple Mount and everything that was on it. I mean, they leveled it, and they threw things off of the wall. And you can see from 2,000 years ago, they've uncovered those rocks. Not rocks, massive building rectangular stones. I mean, like the size of this, if you could see it, this baptistry here, massive blocks, all in disrepair, all piled up right there. The archaeologists are doing a fantastic job uncovering what was once Old Jerusalem. But remember, Nehemiah's wall is this little wall right here. That strange little, whatever, it almost looks like the Florida Panhandle, doesn't it? Or not the Panhandle, but the bottom part of Florida. That little space is what we're talking about that Nehemiah is trying to get rebuilt. Look what it says in Nehemiah chapter 4. It says, now it came about when Sanballat, these are the enemies of Israel. There are several of them. The group is going to be expanded here as we go into this. It says, now it came about when Sanballat heard that we were rebuilding the wall, he became furious and very angry, and he mocked the Jews. Certainly, the Lord God, Yahweh, had sent Nehemiah back to rebuild the wall. The enemy of God, Satan, says, no, we're not going to do that. And he's got his men on the ground, led by this guy, Sanballat, saying, we don't want the city rebuilt. Verse 2 says, he spoke in the presence of his brothers. This is Sanballat trying to stir up agitation, stir up commotion against Israel. Happens every day in this world. Still goes on right now. There are Sanballats in every country on the globe. He spoke in the presence of his brothers and the wealthy men of Samaria. And this is what he said. What are these feeble Jews doing? Are they going to restore it for themselves? Can these feeble Jews really rebuild this great wall? I've shown you pictures of what a city wall looks like. Massive undertaking. Can they offer sacrifices? He's asking, can they actually complete this job and offer thanksgiving sacrifices to their God afterwards? These feeble, weak, ineffective Jews. Can they finish in a day? He's mocking every part. So you've got everybody out there, like I said, the craftsmen, the merchants, the daughters, everybody's out there building the wall. They are mocking every part of the Jewish project, every part of it. And now they're mocking the speed at which you do it. You bring your children out here to build a wall, it's not going to make it any faster doing it this way. Can they revive the stones? Now they're actually mocking the very materials the Jews are using to rebuild the wall. These burned, broken stones. Can they revive the stones from the dusty rubble? Even the burned ones, like I just showed you, there was dusty rubble down here in the corner, up here in the corner that we saw in Israel when we went to Jerusalem. Can they use these old stones? Can they get this done? Verse 3, now Tobiah was Sanballat's right-hand man. Now Tobiah the Ammonite was near him, and he also chimed in mocking Israel. When you mock Israel, who are you really mocking? You're mocking Yahweh, the God of Israel. Tobiah the Ammonite was near Sanballat when he's doing all his mocking, and he says, even what they're building, if a fox should jump on it, he would break their stone wall down. They can't build right. They can't build slowly or fast enough. They don't have the right people. They don't have the right materials. They don't have the right vigor. They're ineffective people. They're weak. They're feeble. And so they're mocking even the quality of the Jews' work here. Remember, all the walls in Jerusalem or all the people in Jerusalem are building the walls. Like I said, the majority of these people are not stonemasons. It's not natural to them. They just want the city protected. They want the city of Jerusalem rebuilt. So this mocking goes on. Nehemiah, the great leader of the Jews, I've told you, has come face to face with people that have authority. These aren't nobodies. These are people in authority. They have the king's ear. It was the same crew that got the building stopped 2 years before. They've got the king's ear. They have authority, and they are pressuring Nehemiah to stop. What does the great leader Nehemiah do? He prays. He prays. Look what it does. Look what it says in verse 4. You're going to attack me personally? You're going to attack the work of my people? You're going to attack the project that I'm leading? I'll go to the Lord with it. Hear, O our God, how we are despised. Return their reproach. Listen to what he asks for. Return their reproach, the reproach of Sanballat and Tobiah. Return the reproach they're giving to us. Return it on their heads and give them up for plunder in a land of captivity. Let their people be captive. Let their people be exiled. Not a very nice prayer, is it? What he says in verse 5, do not forgive their iniquity. Do not forgive them, Father, of the sin with which they're sinning against you and against your people, Jerusalem. I'm here doing your work. I'm asking you not to forgive them for what they've done to your people. This is a strong prayer. Do not forgive their iniquity, and let not their sin be blotted out before you. For they have demoralized the builders. Demoralized is a word that means to make angry. It's not that they made them feel lesser. They irritated them. They made them angry. The builders were angry. That's what the Hebrew word for demoralized means. Remember what I told you last time. Is this list up? Gosh. Anyway, remember last time I showed you 21 things. We're not going to go through the things, but 2 or 3 of them. The Nehemiah Man in Charge is a book that Donald Campbell wrote, and he gave in the book 21 examples of Nehemiah's wonderful godly leadership. I just want to show you a couple of these in what we just read. Nehemiah is being attacked by men. Attacked. And he responds by praying to his father. So Nehemiah, just a couple of things that he was doing here. He was willing to get involved. His hands are dirty in the project. He's in the mix with the people. Not only that, but we saw number 7 in the list of great leadership skills. He prayed at crucial moments. And this is a crucial moment. He didn't get mad. He didn't seek fairness. He fell down on his knees. He recognized the situation for what it was. He prayed to his God. It was unfair. It was uncalled for. It was unfair. It was untrue. But even when he's being ridiculed unfairly, he goes to the Father. He prayed at crucial times. Number 16, he assured them that God was in the project. How did he do that? By falling on his knees. You don't think that all of Israel knew that under this oppression, their leader was praying to God? Astounding man. And number 19, let's not forget this one because we all... let's just say we pretty much all have a problem with this. He did not argue with his opponents. Well, what's he going to say? We have the right to rebuild. We have letters from whatever. All this effort, that's going to turn into anger almost without question. And he doesn't have time for that. He's got a wall to rebuild. He's focused on the project. He's focused on leading people that want to do God's work, not on people that don't want to do God's work. He lets that be. He casts it at the feet of the Father. He gets back to work. It's leadership. Wonderful leadership. These prayers, you may wonder, how could a Jew pray like this? Don't forgive their sin. Don't blot their sin out from them. Make them be captives. Let their land be taken captive. Put them in exile as prisoners. How could a Jew that's so tied into his relationship with God, how could he pray these things? They're called imprecatory prayers. David does it in the Psalms. I'm going to show you a couple of imprecatory psalms here, just a couple of verses. Imprecatory. I should have written it on there. I-M-P-R-E-C-A-T-O-R-Y. I-M-P-R-E-C-A-T-O-R-Y. Imprecatory. When you're not asking for good things for someone, you're asking for discipline. You're asking for exactly what Nehemiah is asking God for here. Those are imprecatory prayers. And you see them throughout the Scriptures. There are many examples in the Psalms where David and other psalm writers said, God, don't forgive them for this. How can Israel get away with that? Look at this psalm in Psalm 69:9. I wonder if anybody else has prayed things like this. For zeal for your house has consumed me, and the reproaches of those who reproach you have fallen on me. Isn't that what he just said? Return their reproach that they're reproaching me with. Turn that around, Lord, and let them get what they want coming to the Jews. What they want the Jews to receive, make them receive it instead. Jesus Christ, your Savior and mine, quoted this verse in his earthly ministry. It says, for zeal for your house has consumed me, and the reproaches of those who reproach you have fallen on me. In the same, now that's not imprecatory, but keep listening. In the same psalm, in verse 24, it says, pour out your indignation on them, and may your burning anger overtake them. How can you say that? Didn't Jesus, when he came, say, pray for your enemies? How can a Jew get away with this? Any thoughts? Jews aren't like the rest of the world. Jews are protected by certain godly promises, especially when they're doing right. And in this moment in Jewish history, they're doing right. In reproaching the Jews as they rebuild the city of Jerusalem, these people, Sanballat, Tobiah, and everybody with them, are reproaching the living God. And so, in keeping with what Yahweh had promised Abraham, so they're doing this against God. Remember what he told Samuel? They're not refusing you, they're rejecting me. The Gentiles are doing the same thing here. They're not rejecting the building of Jerusalem, they're rejecting the building of the city where Yahweh dwells. Make no mistake about it. This is a fight, Satan against me, Sanballat, Tobiah, and his against you, Nehemiah, and the Jews. I'm well aware of what's going on. So many of the Psalms, I was just reading the one yesterday, Psalm 36, Psalm 37, talk about the evil will have their feet will slip eventually. The Lord will cause their feet to slip. They'll get what's coming. And you have in this great leader, Nehemiah, he's not going to stoop down to their level. He's got a job to do. He can't waste his energy on something that's not worthwhile and uplifting and building of the wall. He can't focus on that fight. He doesn't. He ignores it. He ignores them. He simply turns to the Father. Remember this. So not only are they fighting against Yahweh here, but the Jews are under a special protection from God. There's a promise God made to Abraham, the father of the Jews. This is the promise. How many times have we gone over it? In Genesis 12:3, God says to Abraham concerning all his people Israel, I'll bless those who bless you, and the one who curses you, I will curse. So is a Jew wrong when they are being cursed? When a Jew is being cursed, a Jew that's obedient and doing right before the Lord, doing the work of the Lord like Nehemiah is a Jew wrong when he is being cursed to pray to God to curse that curser? He's doing exactly what God said he would do. God said, I'll curse those who curse you. Why wouldn't you think God's thoughts after him? That's what God said he would do. So Nehemiah is saying, I'm asking for you to curse these people. How could God be offended by that? That's exactly what God promised that he would do for them. He would protect them. So that's what we see going on here. Look what it says in verse 6. Let's get back into the verse. Remember the first one there? He was willing to get involved. So we built the wall. It's not completed yet. Look what it says. We built the wall, and the whole wall was joined together. And here's the catch, to half its height. He built a half wall. For the people had a mind to work. So the Jews here, led by Nehemiah, the praying leader Nehemiah, the Jews rose above the discouragement of these Gentile haters. They reached a goal. The first half of the wall had been completed. They'd done what they set out to do. Probably took them about 4 weeks to do this. You want to know how long until we get to this spot of a half wall? About 4 weeks. To build the whole wall, we're told in Nehemiah chapter 6, it took them 52 days. That's approximately 8 weeks. They would have worked 6 days a week. Why would they have only worked 6 days a week? Shabbat, because they're Jews. They recognize Sabbath. They cease working on the seventh day. They would have worked 6 days a week for 8 weeks, about 52 days. So half of that is about 4 weeks. To build half the wall, it took them about a month. That's what we're dealing with here. In verse 6, about a month has gone by since they began the work. Nehemiah, don't miss this fact, is working alongside them. He's not up there in regal outfit just watching and pointing fingers. He's dirty also. He was willing to get involved, a great leader of men. He was with them, keeping them on task, encouraging them through his faith in Yahweh to see this wall built to completion. Verse 7 says, now when Sanballat, look at how it has grown now, the group of detractors, as people from around start realizing, hey, the Jews are rebuilding Jerusalem. It says, now when Sanballat, Tobiah, and the Arabs, the Ammonites, and here's a new name, and the Ashdodites When they heard that the repair of the walls in Jerusalem went on and that the breaches began to be closed, they were very angry. I could go around a circle here and I could show you around the walls where all these people are. I'll tell you this, the Ammonites are on the east, the Arabs are on the south, the Ashdodites are on the west, and the other group is on the north. Jerusalem is surrounded by people who want to attack her and stop the building of the wall. That's as prophetic as you get. That'll happen. That's happened again and again and again, and it'll happen again when Jesus comes back at the second advent. Jerusalem will be surrounded by Gentile enemies wanting to destroy her. This is not a new statement, not a new thought. So it irritated them, and look at what it says in verse 8. So all of them conspired together. They may not have liked each other, but if you want to get two people together, the greatest glue is a common enemy. Common enemy. You saw it in Jesus' day, where the Pharisees and the Herodians got together to try to catch Jesus, to kill this Messiah. A common enemy is an extremely strong glue. And that's what's happening here. All of them conspired together to come and fight against Jerusalem and to cause a disturbance in it. What does Nehemiah do? What would you expect him to do? When the opposition has grown, when they're now threatening Jerusalem with physical action, not just mocking, but now they've come together and they want to fight against Jerusalem, what do you expect Nehemiah to do? He's going to pray. He's going to bow down on his knees and he's going to pray to the God who he knows everything. Look what it says in verse 9. He led the people in prayer, but we prayed to our God. Strong leader. We prayed to our God, and because of them, not only did he pray and say, Yahweh, this is all you. We're just going to keep building the wall and you can defend us however you see fit. He understood this codependence, if you will, this active dependence. God will do his part, man will do their part. And not only did he pray for Yahweh to do his part, it says because of them, we, Israel, humans, we set up a guard. Of course he did. We set up a guard against them day and night. So Nehemiah is in this ever-evolving plan to get this wall finished. He's got new opposition. Something new gets thrown in. He prays to the Lord about it. He devises a plan. I'm going to protect the builders in the city while it's still vulnerable because the wall isn't up. They could attack us at any moment. We don't have the wall with its little narrow walkway and all the little openings in the wall to shoot, but we don't have that. So we are in trouble. We are vulnerable. So he set up a guard. Of course he did. He did what he knew was prudent and right. Going back to Campbell's list, I'm going to add another two. Number 20, he was not discouraged by opposition. How hard is it for Satan to discourage you, to stop you from doing something? Satan, the demons, the world system, how hard is it for us when we want to do something, a couple of things get thrown in the way and it's like, I'm not going to do it, I'm out. It's very easy to get discouraged. These people are being threatened. Their lives are being threatened. These people want to fight against Jerusalem to kill people. But it didn't stop Nehemiah from leading his troops of builders, to building the wall. He wasn't discouraged. He went to the Lord in prayer. And the last one, he courageously used the authority of his position. Courageously led them. He led them in prayer. I wonder if there was anybody in the group and said, forget that, we need to take up arms, we need to fight Nehemiah. And Nehemiah said, no, this is what we're going to do. We are going to bow our knees to the living God, our God who has led us this far, and we're going to wait for direction for the Lord. We'll do what's right, we'll set up a guard, but God will do all these things. Courageous leader. courageously used his authority the authority of his position. We'll see more of that later. Look what it says in verse 10. Thus in Judah, what's going on is they're building half a wall and four. I showed you the wall, an enormous project. What's going on with the daughters? What's going on with the goldsmiths, with the merchants who were used to opening the doors of their shop and standing there until somebody came to buy some matzah? What are they doing in 4 weeks of hard physical labor? They're exhausted. They're physically exhausted. They're spiritually worn to threads. Look what it says in verse 10. Thus in Judah it was said, the strength of the burden bearers is failing. These are the builders. The burden was on them to build a wall. Their strength was failing. They were exhausted. You go out and work in the hot sun in July in Texas, and you're not used to it, you'll be exhausted in a day. You won't go back for day 2 if you're not used to it. It's exhausting, and they were exhausted. It says, yet there is much rubbish. They continued the conversation, the thoughts of the Jews building the wall. Yet there is much rubbish. I mean, imagine the crumbling stones, everything that was knocked over that they had to clean, chip mortar off of, reuse. It was exhausting. There was much rubbish, and we ourselves are unable to rebuild the wall. So the Jews, this army of Jews that were building the wall, wanted to throw in the towel, it seems, because many of them were not used to this hard labor and realized we can't rebuild this wall. Look what it says, verse 11. It wasn't just their stamina, their strength, their fortitude. It wasn't just that was weakening. Look what it says in verse 11. Our enemies have said, they will not know or see, speaking of the Jews will not know or see until we come among them, kill them, and put a stop to the work. So not only is Israel exhausted, but they have this very credible threat of all these Gentile people that want to sneak up on them, attack them when they least expect it, and kill them. Talk about something to demoralize the builders and to stop the project from going forth. What do you need in days like that? You need a leader like Nehemiah. That's exactly what they had. Verse 12. When the Jews who lived near them came and told us, Nehemiah and his close companions, when the Jews who lived near them came and told us 10 times, they will come up against us from every place where you may turn. Nehemiah realized this is a credible threat. The Gentiles are saying, we're going to attack you and kill you. You'll never even see us coming. Your heads are down doing work. You're mixing mortar. You're rolling mortar in some sort of barrel or some sort of container. You're taking it to these people. You're so involved with your head down getting the work done, you won't even see us attack. We'll kill every one of you. Nehemiah realizes this is a real thing. This is a real problem. So it says in verse 13, then, like a good leader, then I stationed men in the lowest parts of the space behind the wall, the exposed places, and I stationed the people in families. A man will protect his family at all costs. It was a brave move. Imagine that. Rick, Amy, Savannah, Caleb, all in one spot on the wall. Because, buddy, if something goes down, Rick will protect his family until he dies. And so Nehemiah brought these family groups together as they're working on the wall to strengthen them. He says, I stationed men in the lowest parts of the space. I stationed the people in families. And I made sure they were armed, swords, spears, and bows. If the Gentiles want to fight, we'll fight. We're not going to pick a fight until they fight, because we have a job to do, and the job is rebuilding the walls of Yahweh's city. And so in 14, I'm looking for a place to stop. We're almost done. When I saw their fear, he knows that the Jews, his workforce, his countrymen, are fearful. When I saw their fear, I rose and spoke to the nobles, to the officials, and the rest of the people. He stands up, Nehemiah does, and this is what he said: do not be afraid of them. Nehemiah, how are you going to assure us that we shouldn't be afraid of them? What does he say? Look what it said in that last one. He assured them God was in the project. What does the great leader say? Remember Yahweh, who is great and awesome. Puts our focus right back on God. In your darkest hour, this leader, a good leader, puts your focus right back on God. If only we had the courage to accept that reproof, that correction, that guidance back towards God. Sometimes in our dark times, it's hard to embrace God. We just want to lash out. When I saw their fear, I rose and I spoke. Do not be afraid of them. Remember the Lord, who is great and awesome. God will do what God says He will do. This is His city. But we also must do, and he said, and fight for your brothers, your sons, your daughters, your wives, and your houses. It's a very calculated move on this leader's part to put the family working on the wall at the same time all together. Brave man. Again, he knew that Yahweh was in charge of this project, and he focused everybody's attention back on Yahweh. Protect your families at all costs. Look at what it says in verse 14 or 15, last verse. When I saw their fear, or 15, when our enemies heard. See, the enemies were all involved in this surprise attack. If we can surprise them, we can get them, we can kill them, if we can surprise them. But when the enemies heard that it was known to us, and that God had frustrated their plan of attack, surprise attack, then all of us returned to the wall, each one to his work. What a great leader of men. He refocused them on Yahweh. He refocused them on the fact that God was in charge of the rebuilding of this city. That fear washed away. They went back to work. Wonderful, wonderful account. All this time that wall is still not done, but we are. Let's close in prayer. Heavenly